Today's project is how to make this really cute flower. It's the perfect gift for babies or premature babies because of the tentacles. Let me place it here and I'll show you what you'll need. You will need a crochet hook. Today I will be using my 2.5mm clover hook. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle and a stitch marker. I would also suggest getting something like a chopstick in order to help you to stuff the face of the flower. You'll need a little bit of toy stuffing, and for today's project I'm going to be using yellow yarn for the petals, white yarn for the face, green yarn for the tentacles, and then a little bit of black yarn in order to embroider the face. This will be today's colour palette. Let's get this project started with making the petals. I'm going to be using yellow yarn for the petals, and I'm going to start with making a slip knot and attaching it to my hook. Next, we want to do 2 chain stitches. In the second chain from the hook, we're going to place 6 single crochets. I'm going to speed up the video a little and meet you back at the end of this round. In the last stitch that you created, let's place our stitch marker so that we know where the end of the round is. If there's a hole forming in the center of your work, grab your yarn tail end and give it a little tug to close it. We can then move on to round 2. For round 2, we're going to do an increase into each of the 6 stitches of round 1. By that I mean we're going to place 2 single crochets into each of the 6 stitches. At the end of round 2, you will have 12 stitches in total. Now you may notice that I am going to be yarning under for this project. It doesn't matter if you want to yarn over or yarn under. I yarn under because I find my stitches are a little bit neater and tighter when I am crocheting. Let's meet back at the end of round 2. Perfect. Let's replace the stitch marker in the very last stitch of the round, and again, if needed, give the yarn tail a little tug to close the hole in the center. Now for round 3. For round 3, we're going to do a single crochet followed by an increase, and we will do that for the entire round. At the end of round 3, you will have 18 stitches. Now for round 4. For round 4, you will do 2 single crochets followed by an increase, and we'll do this for the entire round. At the end of round 4, you will have 24 stitches. Excellent! Now for rounds 5, 6, 7 and 8, and we're just going to be doing single crochets all of the way around. So that's 24 stitches in each of the next 4 rounds. Let's meet back at the end of round 8. Round 9 is up next, and for that we're going to start decreasing. We're going to start with 2 single crochets followed by an invisible decrease. Let me show you how to do the invisible decrease when we do that. Start with the first 2 single crochets. Now for the invisible decrease. We're going to be using the front loops only of the next 2 stitches. So place your hook through the center of each of the next 2 stitches, grab your yarn and complete the stitch as normal. Complete the rest of round 9 with 2 single crochets followed by an invisible decrease for the entirety of the round. At the end of round 9, you'll be left with 18 stitches. For round 10, we're going to start with a single crochet, then follow that with an invisible decrease using the next 2 stitches. We will do that for the entire round, and at the end of round 10, you will have 12 stitches. Round 11 is up next, and for that it's just single crochets into each of the 12 stitches of round 10. At the end of round 11 you'll still have 12 stitches, and we will pause for a moment and I'll show you what to do next. Excellent, that's our petal completed. And if you haven't already, tuck in your yarn end into the center of your petal. The final step is to cut your working yarn. You want to leave a long yarn end in order for us to be able to sew the petal onto our flower. Pull your yarn end through the very final stitch that you created, and there we have it, our petal. We want to make 5 of these in total, so rewind back to the beginning of this project and make 4 more. After you've completed all 5 petals, we can get started on the face of our flower. Grab your white yarn and make a slip knot and attach it to your hook. Make 2 chain stitches. In the second chain from your hook, place 6 single crochets. Like before, let's place that stitch marker in the very last stitch that you created, and if it's needed, you can give your yarn tail a little tug to close the hole in the center. For round 2, we're going to be doing an increase into each of the 6 stitches of round 1. And by that I mean we're going to be placing 2 single crochets into each of the 6 stitches. At the end of round 2, you will have 12 stitches. Replace the stitch marker, and if needed, give that yarn tail a little tug to close the hole in the center. Let's move on to round 3. For round 3, we're going to do a single crochet followed by an increase. We're going to do that for the entire round. At the end of round 3, you will have 18 stitches. Round 4 is up next. For round 4, we're going to do 2 single crochets followed by an increase. We're going to do that for the entire round. And at the end of round 4, you will have 24 stitches. Round 5 is our final increasing round. For this round, you will do 3 single crochets followed by an increase. We'll do that for the entire round, and at the end of round 5, you will have 30 stitches. Excellent! Rounds 6 and 7 are up next, and for these 2 rounds we're going to do single crochets all of the way around. Let's meet back at the end of round 7 and just before you do the final stitch of round 7, as we're going to do a colour change and I would like to talk you through it. We're going to perform a colour change in the very last stitch of this round. But before we do that, I'm going to cut my working yarn, but leave a tail because we want to be able to weave that into the project. So cut your working yarn, and whilst keeping the loop on your hook, we're going to place our hook through the next stitch and grab the working yarn to pull it through until we have 2 loops on our hook. At this point, we can grab our green yarn as we want the back of the face to be in the same color as our tentacle. So place your next color of yarn over your hook and pull that through the 2 loops that are on your hook. And this will perform the color change. We are now ready to start round 8. And for round 8, we're going to be doing single crochets all of the way around, but using the back loops only of the round before. Now, as we've just done a colour change, I also like to weave in the ends of my yarn into my project at this point. So to do that, what I'm going to do is place my hook through the centre of the next stitch, just like this, and I'm going to grab my yarn ends and gently place them over my hook. And I'm doing this in order to be able to secure them into my work. So once we've placed our yarn tail ends over our hook, we can grab our working yarn again and create the single crochet as normal. Again, we're just using the back loops only of the round before. So again, place your hook through the center of the next stitch, grab your tails and place it over your hook, and then create your single crochet as normal. I do this for a couple of stitches and then I continue on my way just doing the single crochets all the way around. And as a reminder, for these single crochets we're using the back loops only, which means that the front loops will remain visible. Let's meet back at the end of round 8. Let's replace the stitch marker in the last stitch you created, and then we can move on to round 9. For round 9, we're going to start with 3 single crochets followed by an invisible decrease. And unlike the previous round, for the single crochets, we do not need to worry about the front and back loops, we're just going to do normal single crochets. So let's start with those 3 single crochets and I'll show you how to do the invisible decrease again. For the invisible decrease, we're going to use the front loops only of the next 2 stitches. So place your hook through the center of the next 2 stitches, grab your working yarn and create your crochet stitch as normal. Continue round 9 with 3 single crochets followed by an invisible decrease for the entire round, and at the end of the round you'll have 24 stitches. Fantastic. Let's move on to round 10. For round 10, we're going to do 2 single crochets followed by an invisible decrease using the next 2 stitches. We're going to do that for the entire round, and at the end of round 10, you're going to have 18 stitches. The flower head is starting to take shape. We have a curved side, and where the green is, it's a lot flatter. We can move on to round 11, and for that round we're doing a single crochet followed by an invisible decrease in the next 2 stitches. Do this for the entire round, and at the end of round 11 you will have 12 stitches. With round 11 finished, let's take a moment and secure our work. We're going to take this opportunity to start stuffing our flower's head, as the hole is big enough for us to fit the stuffing in nicely. To stuff the flower's head, you're going to need a little bit of toy stuffing, and I like to tear it up just to make it a little bit more fluffy and less lumpy. You'll want to grab a little bit of toy stuffing at a time, and if needed, I would recommend grabbing something like a chopstick so that you can get into the very edges of the flower's head. So add a little bit of toy stuffing at a time, and what we're wanting to do is not overstuff it, as we're wanting the front facing part of the head to remain curved and the back end to remain flat. So let's meet back once you have stuffed the head of your flower. Wonderful! With the flower's head fully stuffed, we can see that we have a curved side and a flatter side. We can now move on to the final round of the flower's head. Remove your stitch marker and reattach your work to your hook. Let's place the stitch marker in the very last stitch of the last round, and then we are going to move on to round 12. Round 12 is invisible decreases all of the way around. At the end of round 12, you'll be left with 6 stitches. Let's meet back at the end of this round and I will show you how to close up your work. With round 12 complete, we're now ready to close up our work. Grab your scissors and leave a length of yarn so that we can sew close the hole that's remaining. Pull your working yarn through the final stitch and then attach your yarn tail to your needle as we're going to sew close that remaining hole. The last round leaves us with 6 stitches. And to close this gap, we're going to be doing an invisible decrease all of the way around. So with your yarn needle, grab the front loops only of stitches 1 and 2 and pull it all the way through. Now do the same for stitches 3 and 4. Again, pulling your yarn through, and you'll see the hole is starting to close. We're going to do this one more time for stitches 5 and 6. Perfect! I then like to pass my needle through the center just to tighten up that gap a little bit more. And then the last step is to weave in the end of your yarn tail. Let's meet back once you have closed the hole and weaved in your yarn tail. Now that we've created all 5 petals and the head of the flower, we are ready to sew the petals on. Attach the yarn to your yarn needle. When you pick up the head of your flower, you're going to see the front loops of round 8. We're going to use that as a guide when we're sewing the petals on. I'm going to start sewing from the back of my work, and I'm going to push my needle through one round below the front visible loops, and then push it up through one round above those visible front loops. I'm going to attach the petal by using the very last stitches of the final round of the petal. I'm going to work round the front of the face and then turn the work over and then attach the back of the petal to the back of the face. So let's get started with sewing the petals on, and you're wanting to have them evenly spaced so that they go all the way around the petal's face. Let's meet back once you have finished sewing on all 5 petals. Excellent! With all 5 petals sewn onto the face, we can move on to the tentacles. Grab your green yarn and flip your flower over. We want the tentacles to be placed directly under the top petal. To do that, we're going to count back 3 rounds and place our hook through the post that is between rounds 3 and 4. Attach your yarn to your hook and pull it through that post. Now we're going to chain 61 chain stitches. With all 61 chain stitches complete, we can start working on that tentacle. And we're going to do that by starting on the second chain from our hook, and we're going to place 2 single crochets into it. We want to make sure that our chain is never twisted, as we're going to work down the same side all the way down, placing 2 single crochets into each of the chain stitches. By the end, you will have done 120 single crochets all the way down the chain. As you work down the chain, you may notice that your tentacle is starting to curl in a bit of a funky way, but don't worry, we will fix that at the very end. Let's meet back once you have finished the very first tentacle. Fantastic. With the very first tentacle complete, we can now move on to the second tentacle. And to do that, we're going to move along one post to the side of the first tentacle and push our hook through, grab our yarn and pull that yarn through and create a single crochet. This will act as the start of our next set of chain stitches, and we're going to chain 61 stitches again. But before we do that, let's pause for a moment and I'll show you how to fix this twisted tentacle. First, grab your stitch marker and secure your work, just to make sure that you don't accidentally start pulling out stitches. Grab the end of your tentacle and start twisting, always in the same direction so that you get this wonderful corkscrew shape. Continue to do this all the way down the tentacle. Perfect, it's now very uniform. We can now move on to our second tentacle. So as I said before, we're going to do 61 chain stitches. So reattach your hook to your work and then create 61 chain stitches. Once that's done, we want to then do 2 single crochets into each of the chains, starting from the second chain from the hook, just as we did before. And then we will create a third tentacle using exactly the same method, using the next post along. Once you've created all 3 tentacles, all that's left to do is to weave in the ends. Rewind back if you need further instructions as to how to make each of the tentacles, and let's meet back once you've finished all 3. Fantastic! With all 3 tentacles complete, we can now start sewing on the face of our flower. So grab your black yarn and your needle, and you're needing just enough yarn to sew on 2 eyes and a mouth. To start the sewing, I like to come in from the side and then pop my needle up through between rounds 1 and 2. Make sure you leave a little bit of a yarn tail so that we can weave that in at the end. Now count across 3 rounds in a straight line and push your needle back out 1 stitch diagonal from the inner corner of the eye. Perfect. So as you see, we've got a straight line for this eye. To make it curved, we're going to pass our needle underneath the yarn and grab it. And then we're going to pass that needle back through the hole we came out of. This will secure that yarn in place and also give a bit of a curve to the eye. Pass the needle back through the outer eye and then go up 1 diagonal stitch from that point to create an eyelash. To create the second eye, your starting point is either going to be between rounds 1 and 2, or in my case, to create symmetry, I'm going to start from the center. So I'm going to push my needle all the way through the center of the face and then again count 3 rounds to the side of it to create a straight line. And we want the needle to be coming out 1 stitch diagonally above the inner corner of the eye. Excellent. We've created that straight line eye again, and to make it curved, we're going to pass the needle underneath the yarn to grab it and pass the needle back through the hole we came out of, and then back through the outer corner of the eye. To create that eyelash, we're going to go up 1 diagonal stitch from the outer corner of the eye, and then we're going to move on to the smile. The smile is made in pretty much the same way. We're going to come out just below the inner corner of the eye to start the first corner of the smile. We then want to go across in a straight line by a couple of stitches to first of all make a straight line smile. So I think that's going to be around about here. To make the curve of the smile, we want the needle to come back out just below that straight line that we're about to create. We want it to be central to that straight line, just like this. And then we're going to pass that needle back through underneath the yarn to grab it and create that smile. Put your needle back through the hole we came out of and then pass it all the way through to where we started. Wonderful. Now we have a smiling flower, and all that's left to do is to weave in these yarn ends. And that's us completed our very happy flower, a perfect gift for babies and premature babies. And of course you can make them in whatever color you like. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I'll see you next time for my next tutorial.